Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody to this session about networking in other world regions. My name is Karel Vietsch. I'm the Secretary General of TERENA, and it's my pleasure to be sharing this session this afternoon. Let me say a few words of introduction. The TERENA networking conferences are, of course, about Europe. That's our part of the world. But we have also always had attention in our conferences for the developments in other parts of the world. Much of the focus has always been on North America, which for a very long time has been a leader in networking worldwide, of course, and in still respects still is. But because of that, we sometimes tend to forget that there are also very interesting things happening in other world regions, and that's why we decided in this year's conference to focus in the sessions about other world regions, specifically on the Asia-Pacific region and on Latin America. So that is what the presentations today will be about. We will have one presentation about the Asia-Pacific region and two presentations about the developments in Latin America, where a lot has been happening in the past year. So let me introduce our first speaker. Professor Shigeki Goto is a professor of at the Computer Science Department at Waseda University in Japan. I've known him for quite a few years, for example, because until recently he was the chairman of the CERN, the Coordinating Committee on Intercontinental Research Networking. He told me that a long time ago, as a young man, as a student, he actually spent some time in Europe, particularly in Sweden at Chalmers University. That's not in his official CV that we have in front of us, but it does say there that he worked at Stanford in the 1980s, and after returning to Japan, he became a pioneer of networking in that country. He's really been a leader of the development of research networking in Japan throughout all these years, and also in the Asia-Pacific region. He is currently the chairman of APEN, which is a sort of the Asia-Pacific counterpart to TERENA and Dante, and of APEN Japan as well. He's a vice president of JP-NIC, and he has lots of other functions. He's really an authority in the field, and we're very pleased that he will be speaking to us today. Professor Goto.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Yes, I stayed at Chalmers University Technische Hochschule when I was young as a computer scientist. So I found some similarities in the northern area of this region. Since APAN is rather new, when we started APAN, we investigated various scenes in the globe. So I still keep some of the very old, not the PPT, but the printed version. Now in the US, NSFNet will be divided into regional net, and in Europe, we have many names like EuropeNet by Dante, eBorn, NordNet, 1034, or you may call it 1035, James. And then we come up with the idea of forming APAN. That was inspired by the US initiative. US government, National Science Foundation, keep the ICM project to support the international link to the US to Europe. And also they support some connectivity to Latin America at the time. However, there is no Asia-Pacific regional network at that time, or vacant area. So each country connect to the US one by one. So the US, especially West Coast at the time, played the role of Asia-Pacific. So we formed APAN in 1996. At that time, Professor Kilnam-chon in Korea takes the lead, and also the Professor Michael McRobbie. At the time, he was at National University, Australian National University. After that, he moved to Indiana University, and now he's a very famous person Internet 2, Abilin, etc. At the time, in 1996, when we began discussion, I was a researcher at NTT, telephone company in Japan. If I continue my position at NTT, I would not take any position at the APAN JP. Because in Japan, the university professors seem to be treated as a neutral people, even if one is not neutral. Then the APAN was established, and the Professor Kiranam-chon was a leader, and also Professor Michael McNobby submitted officially the Transpac. That is a connection between the US and Asia. Yeah, physically, its ending point is Tokyo, but it's not dead end. So that's the real meaning of APAN. If we propose the connection between US and Japan, and Tokyo is a dead point, it's a very sad story for both people in the US and the people in the Asia Pacific. So after that, we successfully increased the number of members of APAN, and also Transpac in the initial stage was quite successful. And we are now having Transpac 2, the second phase. During this period, we have increased the number of countries or regions who affiliated at APAN. So here show the APAN regions. However, the map shows each region. The real scene is quite different. So Asia Pacific shows a wide diversity of everything. Like if you take a population or the GDP, GDP per capita, etc. Also the connectivity or penetration rate of the internet. Since I have many members and also affiliates like Transpac or Pacific Wave people from the US and many organizations mainly located in Asia Pacific, and also liaison members including Dante and TERENA, that we are quite happy to have you as a liaison member of APAN. So APAN governance structure is, we have many lessons from other regions, and we follow some TERENA Dante model, especially we saw that a fee structure or a membership structure, we followed the European scheme and modified to accommodate with reality in Asia Pacific. We have committees and also the working groups, just similar to TERENA task force. So link information is printed in so small characters, and you can consult the APAN web page later. So any information shown here is I certainly have a very clear contact point. So although I would not be able to answer all of your questions, however, I am willing to forward your question to the right person in our region. So link is more the boundaries and the more links to cover Asia Pacific region. That covered not all of the AP region, but the most active areas are already connected. And now we have a renewal phase of the NSF, US government project. So we formed a couple of projects. One is the renovation of Transpac, and now the Transpac 2 covers not only Tokyo, and it covered Hong Kong as well. And there is a Gloriad, which connects Moscow, Beijing, Hong Kong, Chicago, and Amsterdam. And also Pacific Wave Translite Pacific Connections, which covers Hawaii and Australia, and Tokyo as well. So here comes TEN2 project. So it's still under discussion. I have many conversations here and also in other regions of this Potsdam city. We'll soon have a meeting in Tokyo, and many countries are quite interested in TEN2 project. So that's one of the examples. We are just collaborating already. Although the link itself will be installed soon, our human network are quite active at this moment. And this information followed by some of the country, reports since I have collected many slides from my friends, I will possibly run out of my time. So I just go through quite simply, and if you have any specific questions, I'm willing to forward the question to the right person in each country. APAN-JP enjoying much bandwidth, and it's natural for Japanese friends to write Japan as a center of this diagram. It connects to Korea, quite fat pipe, and China successfully connected this January, the fat pipe, and for Thai, a couple of links, and Malaysia, and Taipei, and the Philippines, and Singapore is well connected, and Australia, quite fat pipe, and Hawaii. Japan goes through Hawaii to Australia right now. And also there is a connection to Korea to Europe, and also the China, Russia, the connection is supported by Gloria's project. So here shows the APAN-JP exchange point, the possibility some of the sponsors around the corridor would be interested in it. Here shows the Japanese university network called SciNet. Since that the science and technology Japanese government is merged into Ministry of Education, so we cover the universities as well as national laboratories in this diagram. And that's the 10 gigabit per second level connection is SciNet. And also we have a JGN2. It's a Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. They support the JGN2. It's a test bed. Although the bandwidth is just a similar level, 10 gigabit PS at this moment. However, we have two optical test beds in Tokyo, Tsukuba area, and also Osaka, the western part. So we have two test beds. The explanation is printed in small also. However, I am one of the member of the steering committee for JGN2, and I am also visiting professor at NII who is running SciNet. So I know the person who knows a very detailed configuration of these networks. And also wide group headed by Professor Jumura at Keio University. There is an IEF link, and that link have been used for a large-scale demonstration like an uncompressed high-definition TV, the transmission. And it has a plan to extend the coverage to southern area of AP. In Korea, there are a couple of active projects, like using a light path and also the demonstration in telemedicine. And there is a fat pipe along the sea level, 200 kilometers without any repeaters or amplifiers. So the length of the light was intensified a little bit. That's a direct fiber. Korean people love the high-definition TV. The one is the demonstration. This is a layout of some of the stage of the dance at some stage and the music at the other side. So they made, by some reason, a Dancing Queen project. Now, many of you know, I know that the Dancing Queen is ABBA, so it's Swedish, the svenska, but by any reason that Korean people love that term. And Korea is a part of the Gloria project, but this diagram will be possibly updated soon. And also the Korea, the hybrid approach, so hybrid optic and also the packet is achieved. And SANET, it's a China education, that means a China university network. It's a quite fat pipe, and they are enjoying the 40 gigabit per second at some links. And Hong Kong is a very important place for exchange the information, and so they are quite active. Sorry for Chinese newspaper clipper. And Singapore is quite active to running exchange point. It's very natural. If you take a look at the cable layouts of the undermarine cable, Singapore is one of the focal points. And also the people in Australia is quite active to connect their continent to the other continent, like the US. And there is a plan still under discussion, is a direct link from Japan to Australia, and also Australia to Singapore. Hopefully we'll install it in the near future. From engineering point of view, we conduct an end-to-end performance demonstration, and it's a kind of record at the Internet 2 meeting. That was done by the University of Tokyo, Professor Hiraki. He is just designing a new network interface card and debugging the software package for drivers, etc., to attain the speed. It's at Amsterdam at the right end, and the middle is the US, and also Canada, and Tokyo. And we are conducting the observatory or the measurement activities together with the people in the Internet too. And also the security issues are quite important nowadays. So we are collaborating with Isaac in the US to detect the abnormal patterns or anomaly in packets. And just a clip of applications. Some of you came from the application area. Here is a chart, but the printed is so small characters again. Better collaboration, it's a really global collaboration, and we should cover India for sure. However, the real connectivity right now to India is still the lower bandwidth. And quite recently, we have a very bad tsunami caused by big earthquake in Indonesia. So that's affect both Sri Lanka, also Thailand, and some part of the India as well. So we are collaborating, especially people in Thailand that call for the meeting. And is there any way from the ICT side to help people to put that early warning system or analysis or the simulation, etc. Even though we cannot prevent the earthquake itself, there is a way for us to help people to more safe life in that region. And in Asia Pacific, natural resource is very important. And some of you may puzzled at this slide. It's given by the Minister of Agriculture. They are quite active. They're putting the field monitor. This is not a simple insect attractor. This is monitoring so many things. We have many things to observe the real Earth, and that's very important since Japan should import so many crops from outside. And also telemedicine is really the hotspot application area. And every time I saw this real operation, it's a still picture, but the Dr. Shimizu always show us a live high definition quality. So someone who is not good at seeing a blood or something, just close eyes, and some endoscopic surgery, not open your body. is very popular in Japan, but still the number is limited. The number of operations are limited in Korea. So both the medical team just exchange information and using high definition TV and a kind of training or the intern, the doctors in the Korea can observe the real operation in the Kyushu University Hospital. So that area is quite active, and they form some meeting, and also they will soon form a working group in APAN. So here show that just the meeting report, last meeting in Bangkok this January, we urgently set up a new bird of feather meeting for the tsunami earthquake session, and roughly 300 people gathering at the APAN meeting, and some of our friends from Europe and also US they join. And the next meeting will be in Taipei in this August, and the next meeting will be in Tokyo, very famous electric town Akihabara. There is a newly built building, and it's just the 30-second walk from the Akihabara station. And also we'll hold the TEN2 kickoff workshop in Thailand because we asked Thailand to take care of the APAN Secretariat. And also the people in Thailand, especially at the AIT, Asia Institute of Technology, they have a good team for training. So we jointly hold the kickoff workshop, and here shows some report. So as I mentioned, all the slides are contributed from my friends. I just write a single page that is a title. So if you ask some questions here right now or at the reception time, I'm willing to forward your question to the right person. This covers 2 pages, quite long. So thank you very much for your kind listening, and I'm happy to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Goto. Are there any questions from the audience? There's always this silence. Yes. Please wait. The lady will come with the microphone.
You were showing your very advanced insect catcher, which is a sensor. Do you have plans to deploy nationally wireless networks for these sensors for research and education networks?
You mean the wireless in general?
In general, for sensors in general.
Oh, sensors and wireless.
Yes. Is it a research and education initiative, or everyone is doing their own thing, or is it centralized?
You mean the sensor network?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, sensor network is because the precise story will be given to you by the people at the Ministry of Agriculture. But basically, since it needs some of power electric, so there is a plan. However, not fully wireless. This unit, but they have a plan to cover some desert area in China mainland. So they are collaboratively developing the next one, much smaller and consume less energy, and hopefully powered by solar energy or something. But this one is still very big, and putting on the field. And usually field is quite well supplied by the electric. But the connections, in terms of the connections, they are investigating everything, using a wireless LAN, and also they're using satellite. In some region in the Asia Pacific, a kind of jungle, the seaside is okay for fibers. However, the inside of some peninsula, big island, we still need satellite communications, like Philippines or Indonesia. So some of the link table of APAN just utilize the satellite. So satellite is really tricky because one side is okay. However, the other side, if they do not have the transmitter, we use the single or one-way traffic And backward is a quite narrow channel, sometimes even the dial-up level. So we developed jointly with the people in France to the one directional routing mechanism to cover the satellite area in AP, especially for the southern part. So if you have more questions, I'm willing to answer your questions through my friend who is good at the satellite communication always, as well as the people in the sensor at the Muffin who are developing a new latest unit.
Okay, fine. I think we have a second question from the same part of the room. Yes?
My name is David Simonson from Denmark. I saw that there was a circle around India going into Pakistan, and is there any plans to extend that into Afghanistan also, and those countries in that part of the world, which are today relatively poorly connected?
Yeah, that's right. So up to now, since APAN was started by high performance or the high speed connection, so Pakistan is definitely one of the members of APAN. However, the connectivity is not, at lower speed. But we encourage them to hold seminars, and we send some speakers. Pakistan, India, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. These are still developing. But we certainly need good connectivity. But right now, it's not enough. We realize for Afghanistan, we are communicating with the people, but still not a member of APAN. So that area, we certainly need more conversation with the people in the European side. They are helping some countries, and some members sometimes they visit us or contact us.
Yes, we actually had a discussion in our current meeting on Saturday and Sunday whether countries like Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, who are there somewhere in the middle, whether they are part of Europe or part of Asia Pacific. And I think the answer right now is that they are still sitting on the fence. So that will be sorted out, but isn't sorted out yet. Are there any other questions? No, I don't think so. Then I'd like to thank again Professor Goto.
Thank you.
And let me introduce our next speaker. Actually, the last two presentations of this session are very much interrelated because they're both about the developments in Latin America, and they're complementary. And the two speakers decided that for the clarity of presentation, it would be best to reverse the order of the presentations that you see in the printed program. So we first have Catherine Steuver to address us. She used to work for Dante already in 1997 as the head of external relations. Some 5 years later, she left Dante and moved to Madrid to take care of the rapid increase of the size of her family. But later she came back to work for Dante based in Madrid, and since then she has been addressing particularly Dante's work in the ALICE project that aims at Latin America, and that's what she's going to tell us about now.
Thank you, Karel. Yes, I would like to basically introduce the issues of Latin America. I mean, as Karel has been saying before, many things have happened in Latin America since 2002. Many things have happened thanks to the European Commission-funded ALICE project. There's a lot of confusion going on worldwide. When I travel, I always see people saying, well, what is ALICE? What is Clara? What is Red Clara? What does Dante do in the whole thing? And I think I'm trying to address specifically these points in the presentation. Just to give you a quick overview of the ALICE project in itself, it is, as I say, a European Union project. In that sense, it's a Europe Aid project. It's not IST, it's a development project. It uses Europe Aid corporation money. So it is, it's not an IST-funded project, it's a development aid project, which is, from the European Union point of view, gives it a slightly different angle. It will run until the 31st of May 2006 with a possibility of an extension. So we have another year to go. As you see, it's funded with 10 million euros. which from the European Union, that's about 80%, and the remaining 20% will have to be or are funded by the Latin American partners that are connected to the network. The project is coordinated by Dante. The main reason for that is that Dante had the experience in Europe how to build a regional network. We were asked by the European Commission to coordinate the project for Latin America. The partners in Europe are the national research and education networks in Italy, Portugal, Spain, and France, for their obvious ties with Latin America. And the partners in Latin America are Clara, which is sort of the Dante counterpart in an embryonic style, I would say, in Latin America, and the 18 Latin American national research and education networks as they are developing now. One of the very important things that I always like to point out when talking about the ALICE project is that, yes, it is coordinated by Dante, but it is not entirely managed by Dante. We try to share the management of the ALICE project as much as possible. As the coordinating partner, and because of the rules of the European Commission of how to spend the money, Dante is the only organization within the project that is holding the funds, that can actually do tender negotiations and then sign contractual agreements with providers. We're also responsible for the relationship with the EC, so we have to make sure that the EC is always informed and happy. We do a part of the PR, we do a part of the sustainability, but especially in the PR and the sustainability part, we've seen in the last year where Clara, as an organization in Latin America, has really started to become a sort of more functional organization, that this is shifting more and more towards Latin America, and I think that makes a lot of sense. In the end, it's the Latin American interest to make the network sustainable, and it's also in the Latin American interest to promote the network in their own institutions on all across Latin America. And I think that sort of sharing of work is very important. Clara is supporting the tender negotiations massively. I think we have seen, while we were negotiating with providers in Europe, that Dante could handle that very well. Now that we are negotiating for spur links within Latin America with national providers, we just absolutely see and face the fact that as a European organization, we have such cultural differences with Latin America that we're often simply stuck. And we need Clara to overcome these cultural differences. Clara obviously gives a lot of support to the Latin American NRENs, helping them, especially the newcomers, to develop their own national infrastructure and national organizations. And then Clara is responsible for the entire Red Clara technical management. The technical management, as I said, I mean, we were asking ourselves the question when we started the project in Dante, well, where can this network be managed? I mean, who's going to do the operations? Who's going to be the engineering? Who will be responsible for the implementation of new services? And it was clear to us that that is something that Dante could not do in Latin America, absolutely not. The network had to be run by Clara within Latin America, and that's what we've also achieved to be doing. So the Clara people have organized themselves into a technical group, which all the Latin American NRENs participate. The Clara Tech is basically the organization that overviews all the network engineering and operational tasks, and they give training and technical support. Clara itself then has taken the decision to split the function of the engineering group and the operations. The Clara Network Engineering Group is run by the Brazilian NREN, which is called RNP. And all these activities, all Clara activities, are funded currently via the ALICE project. So, I mean, that is where ALICE and Clara are very close. Clara works independently, but is funded through the ALICE money. And in that respect, there's always, of course, the coordination role of Dante. That's the overview of the Network Operations Center. It's run in Mexico, so the network is run from Mexico. And then we have also a very important part of the ALICE project and the Clara project, which is the training and technical support, which is mainly focused on those networks in Latin America that are currently developing. And Florencio will be showing you in his presentation who these networks are. So what are our achievements so far? The ALICE basically the main achievement is the network itself. We have been able to implement the backbone, and I have to say many thanks to our friends in Global Crossing, because I think without you we wouldn't have been able to do it. And this backbone is connecting the NRENs of Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela today. So we have 7 NRENs connected from the 18 that can be connected to the network. And we have also the interconnection of the Red Clara network with GEANT in Europe. And the first packets crossed from Santiago de Chile to Madrid on the night of the 31st of August 2004. I think it was the 1st of September 2004 in Europe, and it was an amazing celebration on our mailing list. I mean, you should have seen it, because really it meant that for the first time there was direct connectivity from Latin America to Europe. There was the first time that Latin Americans could communicate internally in an own regional backbone, and I think the 31st of August 2004, I think we made a little bit of Latin American internet history. I think that's going to be a date that we will always look back to. So that's the network as it is today. So you see that we have been able to create a ring that connects the main parts of the network. That's an STM1 ring. We have been able to receive quite a generous donation from Cisco, so the equipment in this network is Cisco equipment. There's also some spur links. The spurs go to Venezuela, to Peru, and Uruguay. We are hoping that by the end of July, I would say, by the end of July 2005, we will connect the Central American countries, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. And I would say by probably August time, we should also be able to connect Ecuador. Later on this year, we should be able to connect Colombia. And we have a couple of problems still finding solutions for Bolivia and Paraguay and Cuba. But I think that will eventually be solved. And that basically would mean then that, from this first start of a backbone within Latin America, we will be able to connect all countries. The speeds of the connectivity are still rather low, but I think we need to all be aware that this is it's just the first step, and this first step needs to be taken, and I'm quite positive that afterwards the network will grow in a similar way as we have seen the European networks grow in the last 10 years. But I think Alice or Clara is not so only the infrastructure. I think what we've also been able to achieve is really create a community in Latin America. It's my understanding that the Latin Americans have always wanted to have this network, and they have always wanted to cooperate. I think that the factor missing was this sort of first funding, initial funding that should help along, make things easier for the first time. So the creation of Clara was really a logic step for Latin America to take. We had a meeting in June 2002 in Toledo, and the Clara organization was, I think, achieved already in the first evening at dinner. Then it was clear people were looking for a name, and it was clear that they wanted to organize on a regional level to be able to respond to Europe as a region and not to respond to Europe in bilateral agreements. The second step then obviously was very quickly to create the technical working groups. And I think the training that we've organized has also been very interesting for the engineers, and this training is supported obviously especially by the European partners. I mean, we had a training session on IPv6, which was run by our colleagues from Portugal. We had a training session on network security, which was run on the transits documentation that TERENA and TERENA have been developing. So I think that's all the synergies that we've developed there are very good. We're now looking at more cooperation with LACNIC. I would really like our Latin American colleagues to get more closer contact with RIPE, because I think there's still a lot of cooperation, and that can be very interesting. Was launched in a very high political launch ceremony at the European, Latin American, Caribbean Forum for the Information Society in November 2004. When we talk about the implementation of this network, I think that's when it becomes really interesting. One of my colleagues in Red Clara, the chief technical person in Clara, put it the way that Red Clara boldly went where no other Latin American had gone before, and I think that's the experience that we've made. It is the first time that there is a regional infrastructure for Latin America on that scale. We encountered all sorts of problems and challenges, I would say, that we never thought we would encounter from our European perspective. This was related to the import of equipment, where again I must say that many thanks to Logicalis and Cisco that helped us. It was in the housing facilities where we, especially in Tijuana, faced quite an issue, but again our friends in Global Crossing were very helpful and found solutions. And it was the immense coordination between the partners. I mean, you have to see that there's 19 Latin American partners, 5 European partners, and if you want to import your equipment into Santiago and you have Oh, I'm not here? Oh, you can't hear me? Oh, could you not hear me before? Okay.
Switch this.
All right. Yes, thank you. So, and if you look at trying to import equipment, then again, without any wanting to pay taxes, you have to involve a university. And it's really a complex matter, but we've been able to do it. I think it's been an enormous learning curve for all of us. Next time around, whenever we upgrade the network or when we now put new links into service, I think we've all learned a lot. And I think it's been a very interesting time, and I think the challenges will come now with the implementation of Central America, which again is a completely new environment to us. What are the current issues? We still have some local loop challenges in Latin America, where local loops are not as easily available and at the same service level as international connectivity. We still have a challenge in the Tijuana POP, which will have to grow to be able to cater for the Central American and also the North American connectivity. We need to now finalize contractual agreements for connectivity, especially to Ecuador and Colombia. And we need to find solutions for the remaining countries, especially Bolivia, Cuba, Honduras and Paraguay, where we're still facing very high connectivity costs, at least in the given budget that we have. And we have the very big issue of sustainability after 2006. This is an average pricing that we are looking at in Latin America. I mean, if you see this, this close to the zero here, does this work? No. Yeah, there. I mean, this is Western Europe. This is about the pricing in GEANT these days. I mean, it's close to zero for 1 megabit per year. I mean, it's not close to zero, but in the scale it is. Transatlantic, it is a bit higher, but I mean, I think transatlantic pricing even to Latin America is already quite competitive. The ring locations are still, still quite competitive, but already, I mean, if you compare the ring locations, which are supposed to be the most competitive markets in Latin America, with the most competitive markets in Europe, you still see that, there is quite a difference in pricing. And you have to be aware always that this is Latin America. This is not necessarily countries that have the same economic power as European countries. Central America is a big blob. It is unbelievable how much connectivity still costs us there. But this is, again, already reduced prices to the first offer that we've seen. So that's quite amazing. And these are the high price locations that I'm talking about. I mean, these are average prices of the offers that we have seen. And you see that connectivity to these countries like Bolivia, Paraguay, Honduras, and especially Cuba are just outrageous. And if you have a given budget of 12.5 million to spend over 3 years, I mean, you can just spend all the money on just 4 megabits to one of those high price location countries. So this is our challenge. This is our challenge because this means sustainability. If prices are remaining like this, we will never be sustainable. The network will never be sustainable. It needs the prices need to lower for these countries to be able to cover the costs. Otherwise, we will always have to be dependent on foreign money, or EC funding, other institutional funding. If the network is supposed to be sustainable and carry itself by the Latin American entrants, we will have to work in the coming tenders, during the tenders, to bring these costs down, because otherwise this is not possible. And I can show you how well negotiations work by showing you this. You have here in Ecuador, I think Ecuador is my most favorite. Last year, if you would have asked me, is there a chance for Ecuador to connect to the network, I would have said never, because next to Cuba, Ecuador was the most pricey place. And you see that the average offer that we received in 2003, I mean, that was average. That is not just one provider, that's several providers. And if you compare that to the best offer that we've received for Ecuador in 2005, which is just the best offer, you can see that it's an absolute, I mean, it's amazing. And how did that happen? That happened because in Ecuador, people got together, the NREN, the government, the telecoms providers that were interested, national telecom providers that were interested, and said, this cannot be. We have a unique opportunity to connect to Red Clara. This is important for our country. A research network is not just infrastructure to a country, it's an asset. It's an asset to education and to universities. We cannot be the last in line. It is impossible. So in Ecuador, people have really just taken the step forward, have made a consortium, and have been able to really make the decisive step ahead. And of course, we will be able to pay for this. Of course. In Uruguay, it's a very similar situation, with the difference that in Uruguay you don't even have a competitive market, but a monopolist market. And I think this is very encouraging, because you can see that even monopolists can be persuaded. And maybe together with the government, it's even easier to persuade. But of course, I think these two are very good examples, because now you can take the example from Uruguay and go to the monopolist in Paraguay and say, why can they do it in Uruguay? Why can't you do it in Paraguay? And this is the sort of name and shame approach that we will have to approach for all the remaining locations to be able to lower the prices. And I think that's probably the most important thing that we will have to do in the next year. So as you see, the impact of negotiations, tender negotiations, is really quite important. I think the impact, you can only, and I think this is where the project coordination from Dante is really rather limited. This is where we completely rely on our Latin American partners to lead these activities, and where they can make most, because they live in the countries, they know the realities of the countries, they know who to speak to, and in the end, Dante can just say, okay, you guys go ahead, you do that, and once you're done, we'll get ahead, and we'll enter then the official negotiations. So I think this is something that has been done really successfully. It has led to a breakthrough in Ecuador, in Colombia, and in Uruguay. But we still have not achieved anything in Bolivia, Paraguay, and Cuba, but I think this is also mainly to the political situations in these countries, that is very complex environments. So, and I think this is, as I said before, I think this is, when we look at, okay, EC funding ends in 2006, what is going to happen to Red Clara? I think these negotiations have actually the most impact on the sustainability of the network, because only cost-based pricing will be able to be sustained. But one has to say that probably, I mean, the Latin America does not have as much infrastructure as Europe. I mean, we have seen over the last 5 years in Europe prices for telecommunications going down like crazy. I don't think that will happen in a similar way in Latin America, because the competition is less. It might happen in the most competitive places, in the big cities, but as we are trying to build a network that is covering more than Sao Paulo, Mexico City, and Santiago de Chile, I think this will remain a challenge. So I think the decrease in pricing will not be as drastic as in Europe, but at the same time, people will need and will want more bandwidth for many reasons that Ed Seidel has been pointing out this morning. And so the challenge remains. I mean, we will have higher prices in countries that have potentially very, very much more difficulties in their economic power. So we will. I think that is going to be an ongoing challenge for Europe, and as far as we want to help Latin America, and for Latin America itself, obviously. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to Florencio, who will now give you the details of what's happening internally in Latin America.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, because these two presentations are so much related, we decided not to do questions and answers now, but leave that until after the next presentation. So if you have a question for Catherine, it might actually be answered in the next presentation, and if not, remember it, and we'll come back to it at the end of this session. So let me introduce our last speaker of this session, who is Florencio Utreras, who I've also known for quite some time for the continental contacts that we have. He used to be the executive director of REUNA, which is the National Research and Education Network in Chile, and he has been very much involved in the establishment of CLARA. I think we have one microphone too many.
Yeah, I'll turn that off.
He has been very much involved in the establishment of CLARA, and he is actually now the executive director or general manager or whatever you call it in your part of the world of CLARA, leading that organization, although still based in Chile, I understand. And he's going to tell us the rest of the Latin America story. Florencio.
Thank you very much, Karel, and thank you, Catherine, for the great presentation. So let me just start with the last picture that we have. This picture shows a little bit about the sizes of the links. We're talking about an STM1 backbone, an STM4 connection to JANT, and DS3, that means 45 megabits per second links from Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. As Clara was saying, as Catherine was pointing out, the prices of the links, especially to Central America or to the countries that Catherine mentioned, like Bolivia, Paraguay, and Cuba, are so outrageous that they would never be able to pay them on their own unless there is some sort of help or there is some change in the situation of infrastructure in that region. To give you an idea, right now, you had this picture. You didn't have maybe a numerical notion of the figures in there involved. But yesterday I was calculating that 1 megabit per second put in Santiago is about 150 times cheaper than the same one put in Cuba. 150 times. And another figure that you may be interested in is that if you look at the cost of the average cost of any bandwidth, 1 meg or DS3 or whatever, there is a list of STM1s that appears in one of those studies of telecom around the world. The average price in North America, in Europe, and in Latin America have all decreased during the last 10 years. But the ratio between the prices have kept the same. So it means that an STM1 was 10 times cheaper in Europe, between Europe and North America 5 years ago, and now still 10 times cheaper. Even though the prices in Latin America have been decreased by a factor of almost 100 in the same period of time. So the decay that you see in Europe has also been happening in Latin America, but 10 times higher. Where in the countries where the GDP in average is about 10 times lower, or 5 times lower, to be more precise. So that's a difficulty. We have to face that. We also have had contribution from the United States. So Red Clara is also going to be connected within this week, by the way, to the United States through Tijuana to San Diego and through Sao Paulo, Miami, and into the U.S. networks. That is thank you to the NSF IRNC program that was mentioned before also by the APAN fellows. So this is what we have now. But that is only the outside, or just getting into the countries. With the difficulties that we are facing, we are going to get to every country this year, as Catherine mentioned. We're already in 7 countries. We're going to get to the 18. I'm sure that we're going to overcome the difficulties in Cuba, too. So how are we going to get inside the countries? How are we going to make these organizations sustainable? How are we going to make sure that the investment is not just for a few years, but for a long time? Well, as Catherine said, in Toledo, when we met for the first time for this ALICE project, we very quickly agreed on establishing an organization. I remember a good friend of us, Bernard Fabianek, said, "You have already agreed that? Half an hour? Impossible." It took us a long time. Well, we said, yes, it took us a long time, too. It has taken us 10 years. The only problem is that you have seen only the final. When we found somebody who was willing to put the money on it, then we were ready from the point of view of agreements. So that was a very good thing because we needed coordination. As Catherine said, we needed an organization that could help in coordinating all these efforts and also in making this effort self-sustainable after the project. So we have created this CLARA organization. This CLARA organization is a not-for-profit organization that was officially accepted by the Uruguayan Minister of Justice in December 2004. It took about 6 months for the bylaws to be approved by the Minister of Uruguay. Why Uruguay, you would say? Well, the reason is that in Uruguay, they have established special laws for international organizations. There are several international organizations based in Uruguay, UNESCO and the ICA and other organizations, ICA and so on. And the same LACNIC is based in Uruguay. LACNIC is the NIC for Latin America, the one that distributes the IP numbers. So we have established this organization, and we intend to keep it simple. But this is a very small description of the structure that we have right now that was already described more or less by Catherine. So we have a General Assembly, of course. We have a board of directors and a president. The president is Nelson Simoes from RNP. And myself. So this organization is really very light. About 75 kilograms. It's myself. Just myself for the time being. We have the accounting hired in Uruguay to LACNIC. So we don't have a stable personnel. We just hire another organization which is close to us, who is willing to accept the challenge of working for us. So they are doing the accounting, very cheap for the time being. We have also hired legal office in Uruguay because the studies or the bylaws are from Uruguay, of course. But then we have also 3 other subcontracts. Catherine already mentioned the network engineering group, which is based in Brazil and is inside RNP, the Brazilian network. So we have a subcontract with the RNP. We have a subcontract with CURI in Mexico to manage the network, the operations. And the public relations and the database management comes from Reuna in Chile. So we have 3 subcontracts, and I like very much try to establish an organization that is very light in the core, has subcontracts whenever we have the needs and the money to pay for them. And another interesting thing is that I've been able to work from home. So I am doing what I preach, which is very nice, by the way. But of course, I have to travel also. So our administration, as I said, very light, and we would like to keep it light. Of course, a bit of fat would be good. Maybe a few more people. We're not going to say how many, but a few more we're going to need. Because we have all those partners. By the way, last week, the Clara board accepted the request from Bolivia to become a partner. They made their official request to become a partner. So now we have all these countries with one organization, each one, some of them operational, some of them organizing, to be part of the network. This is very interesting. At the beginning of the ALICE project, there were 5 operational NRENs in Latin America: Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Venezuela. That was it, 5. If you look at here, you see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 operational organizations. And the other 5 are either in deployment or organizing. So the first impact is that the point of the importance of having a research network has been established in all the countries where there were no research networks. So that is already an acquisition of the ALICE project, which is maybe more important than the network itself, which was, of course, the motivation for all this. Let me just give you a short picture of what is going on. This is Ecuador. Ecuador is a very interesting case. In Ecuador, as Catherine mentioned, the price of having a link into Ecuador was incredibly high last year, only 1 year ago. That high that it was impossible to assign the tender. We had to close the tender and go for a new tender process. And in that new tender process, the guys from Ecuador, in the meantime, get organized themselves, agreed among the universities, established a working organization, and started to lobby the telcos. And then found, within the 5 or 7 telcos, they found one, at least one, they have found the 2 or 3, who had good ears for them. That organization helped them to build their own national network. And that organization put on the table a great offer. So now they are going to be connected at 45 megabits per second with the money that last year we could not pay for less than 10, or for 2. That was actually for 2 megabits per second. So in just 1 year, they have achieved great things. I was there a couple of weeks ago. I was in Loja, a very small university in the Andes, close to the border with the forest, with the Amazon. Very interesting place, very small university, 2,000 students, plus 16,000 students on e-learning. So those guys were very interested in having a good network. They have, the Universidad de Loja, they have in, maybe the number is the wrong one, it's about 12 cities in Ecuador. They have small e-learning centers where people go for registration, to receive their material, to assist to tutorials, to have video conferences with Loja, and to have access to computers if they need to. So it's 8 times more students outside than inside. They were very interested. Now they're establishing another point of presence in Bolivia. So they're going to benefit from Red Clara day one. They are eager to get the connection. The Peruvian friends. In Peru, there was no network. I mean, there was an internet network, not-for-profit network, back in the 90s. But then it became a commodity internet provider, and they didn't have an academic network. The universities had never agreed on getting together and connected somewhere. The cost was too high. They got together, and they formed a network. The network is already connecting 6 institutions in Lima. The infrastructure in Peru is not yet strong enough to allow them to go away from Lima. Peru is a very large country. Peru is about, in surface, is about 7 times Chile, more or less. And the population in Peru is about 30 million people. It's about double what we have in Chile. But the network inside covers essentially 3 or 4 cities. And the network capable of these type of connections, which are very expensive inside Lima yet, is very poor. So it's very difficult for them to get inside, to get into, I don't know, Cusco, or to get into Catamarca, or any of the places. It's very difficult. So they are making the effort. They have created the network. They have bought the equipment. They have built an organization. They have got their legal bylaws and so. So in just 1 year, and they are already connected. Colombia, another very interesting case. We all know maybe that the difficulties, political difficulties, and security difficulties that you can face in Colombia. They have been working very hard. From the very beginning, they wanted to get connected to the network. There was a leading university, Universidad del Cauca. They approached us immediately, and we want to be there. Then there was a national agency saying, yes, we are going to help. And they, in 1 year again, or maybe 8 months, they decided that they were to build a national backbone for Colombia, that they were going to fund the connection to the Red Clara, and they invited the universities to make clusters, regional clusters, to create their own regional networks. The day I was leaving Santiago, in the afternoon. In the morning, I participated in a video conference with the regional network of Cauca in the south. That was the first regional network that was operational. And there is one in Cali, one in Bogota, one in Barranquilla. So many of the regional networks are in construction. Actually, when I go back 2 days after, I'm going to participate in the launch of the Barranquilla regional network. So they are moving very fast, and now they are pushing us. When is my connection ready? So we have to go fast. Central America. Guatemala. Well, for instance, in Guatemala, the same case as in Peru, several universities, some of them are nationwide, but the only point that they are covering until now is the Guatemala City. In Guatemala City, only they have this metro network, and they are struggling to connect the other networks outside. Now, Guatemala is a bit different. You may not know, but in Guatemala, there are many submarine cables crossing right in front. So the infrastructure for international connectivity situation is much better than in other countries of Central America, but the infrastructure inside the country, again, very poor. So this is the kind of problem we're facing all the time. We have seen, for instance, with Catherine, we have suffered a lot because in some of those small countries, there was, of course, a champion, somebody leading the network, somebody trying to get the guys together. Once he had convinced them, everything was ready. We could not get the right price to connect them. Or in the last tender. In this tender we did, not in the last one. So last year, when we had to make the very difficult decision to say, we're not going to connect you right now. You will have to wait until we make a second tender. Well, we had a very hard meeting because those guys had made their job inside. And they were maybe saying to us, you have not done your job because you have not got the right price for us. We have made our part. We have built our network. Now deliver. Well, actually, I couldn't deliver last year. We are delivering right now. They understood. And, of course, they are paying now a price that they can pay. Last year, they could not just pay the price. It was impossible. We have the same situation in Nicaragua. This is Uruguay, by the way. They were not in the right order. This is Uruguay. Uruguay is also a very interesting case because there is a dominant university, which is Universidad de la República. Uruguay is a very small country, 3 million people. But they have about 7 or 8 universities, just one large one. But that large one decided to share their network with all the other institutions. So they leader the construction of this national network, which is not led legally by Universidad de la República, even though they are the larger customer, of course. So it takes, you have to be brave for that, normally. This is Venezuela. Venezuela also had, they had an academic network, but they had an academic network centered on normal internet services based essentially on an X25 network. You remember what is that? No, you're too young. Well, that was their reality. Now they are developing an ATM network. So in the introductory talk, Ed Seidel said, well, I remember ATM. Well, yes, for some it's the past. For Venezuela is the future because they are entering right now into that kind of network. That is the best they can get. It's an STM1 network for their country, and that is something a lot more than they had until now. It's about 100 times increase. They had 2 meg essentially in their links, 2 meg X25. So for them, it's a very advanced network. The differences between the countries are striking. Huge differences, not only in prices, but also in development. When you have a country like Brazil, huge country, 160 million people, they have an industry of optical engines. They have an industry in biotechnology. They have it's a country which is close to development. It's a big country where you have research in optical networking, where you have an hybrid networking, which is developing right now. And you have others where the best network you could get was X25. Or in some countries where, since you are mostly technicians, I will tell you the actual figures. We have to connect them with multiple E1s. That means that their network is essentially a telephone-based network. So those are the realities. In Panama, they are just finishing the negotiations, led by CENACID, which is the National Institution for Science and Technology, just getting them connected. And Cuba. there is a network. And apparently it's a very good internal network. They claim to have an STM1 network inside. But it's a black hole in terms of fiber. The cables go all around Cuba. No cable lands in Cuba. So there's no way to get there except if you use satellites. And you know that satellites are very expensive for data transfer. So that is something that we have to solve yet. The Ministry look, it's so important for them that I've even got calls from the Minister of Education saying, we want to be there. Please make sure that we get the right numbers. In a certain way, we're going back to them and say, well, gee, the infrastructure is not very good, so why don't you do something also for yourselves? So we're working on that, but they are really interested. So these guys are very enthusiastic about this. Honduras, same issue more or less. So the final remarks, just to finish. As I said, the NRENs are being created in Latin America. There are huge differences. Some are very advanced, some are just starting. We are building this on this process of helping each other. The cost-sharing model follows very closely the one in Europe, by the way, where you also have differences between countries. So we have some sort of cross-subsidy from the countries where the bandwidth is cheaper to the countries where the bandwidth is more expensive. So, but even though the cost for some countries per meg is extremely high. So we have to build sustainability on this, on negotiations, but also on a very strong organization. We're working on strengthening the organization, on training people, and of course on trying to get the attention of the governments and all the funding bodies, including the international funding bodies, because we need to help them to build not only technical abilities, but also management abilities. So it's a very, very interesting job. But I'm copying my friend from Peru and taking a very loose interpretation of some of the Victor Hugo sentences. The Alice Stream is creating a future in Latin America. Thank you.
Well, Florencio, thank you for this tour of Latin America. Of course, my own organization, TERENA, is not as lightweight as Clara, and I'm afraid that even if I would be the only TERENA employee, it wouldn't be as lightweight as 75 kilos. Are there any questions from the audience, either for Florencio or for Catherine?
There is a question.
Yes, there's a question there.
Yes, David Simonsen from Denmark. Do you see any signs of organizational movements in the service area? You probably know the task forces of TERENA, and it would be very possible, I believe, when you have such an enthusiastic crowd in Latin America to also cooperate on the service level, and not only on the technical level, or primarily on the technical level, as we've heard.
Well, from the point of view of organizing the scientists, the NRENs have been doing some work in that, and we also intend to do some work on that. Actually, in our strategic planning, we discovered that there was the need to foster some specific applications that could be of interest to the whole region. There are some areas where we could find interest of different groups and reasonably developed groups, so that if we could connect them all together, we could have, of course, the demand for advanced services and we could coordinate that and make a few beautiful and clean demonstration projects, we could also make some other scientists more enthusiastic about it. There are some areas where there are obvious needs for big capacities and networks. Astronomy, of course, is one of them. Why? Because it happens that in the north of Chile, their skies are very clean. So there are European telescopes, North American telescopes, Japanese adventures, and there is a very large facility being deployed right now, which is called ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array. It's going to be the largest array of radar telescopes in the world, 64 antennas. I think it's something like 1 petabyte a day of data, a lot of data. So that is clear. So we have to go to those guys and try to help, of course. There are other which are less obvious. Of course, if you want to have the attention of the governments, you will need to go into other areas. Of course, astronomy is impressive, but it does not impact the daily life of people in Latin America, not for the time being at least. So we have to find other areas. For instance, of course, disaster management, as Chigeko was mentioned in the case of the tsunamis, that is something that also may happen in Latin America. We have all the Pacific right in front of us. And actually, the day of the tsunami, the alert organizations in all of Latin America were calculating whether the tide could reach Latin America or not. Where some of the islands, of course, that stay in the middle stop the wave, well, in a certain sense. Of course, we have the tsunamis. Of course, we have the El Niño. It's a huge problem. We have to be able to predict a bit more. And of course, we have the earthquakes. We belong to the fire belt of the Pacific. So there are problems large enough that justify big science. And also there are some problems which maybe are not big science, but very important, like medicine. Catherine has been using a lot the telemedicine project, which is a very nice project to reach poor areas in Brazil with highly specialized medicine brought in from Germany by using radiology through the network. So we are committed to help the community, as Clara helped by the NREMS, to foster 3, 4, or 5 areas. Biodiversity is another one that has been. Biotechnology, of course, that has very impressive developments in Brazil and some other countries, and so on. There are several areas. Of course, rainforest in the case of Ecuador. I learned that there are European labs installed there. So we are going to need to identify, and we are working on that. One of the databases that I mentioned is exactly on that type of applications. So I don't see that Clara will be the unique organization working on this. Part of the things we're going to do is work very closely with the science organizations in the region, and of course with the councils of science and technology of the region, because those are the guys who know a lot better what their scientific applications are and what the needs of the users, or the scientists in this case, or educators are.
Thank you. Do we have a second question from the audience? May I then ask a question myself? I don't know if it's a question for Catherine or for Florencio. The question is about sustainability. Catherine already mentioned that it's necessary for sustainability that these prices go down, that the telecom operators charge you. But yes, that's necessary. Is that also sufficient? Because Alice is a project and therefore by definition a temporary thing. sooner or later Alice will end. Maybe there will be a second project called Daughter of Alice or Son of Alice, but the Commission was providing 80% of the funding, Catherine said. When that money goes away, will the own funding bodies or resources or governments or NRANs in Latin America have sufficient funding to keep the network and to keep the organization?
Well, if we don't, I will be...
you will be out of a job, but...
So you have any place somewhere? Anyway, we are trying. I mean, the idea is that, first of all, we are trying to strengthen the NRANs. So the first point is that we have to make sure that Clara has good, healthy customers. That means that we have enough people in the countries which is being served. And once those guys are, of course, happy with what we deliver, they will be able to pay for the services. Well, they are paying now, of course, but they will have to pay more, certainly. And also working on the operators to lobby them and find prices so that next time, not only some operators make a big discount, but also other operators that have not been in the move until now. So lowering the cost is one of the important parts. Strengthening the NRANs is another important part. And of course, extending the networks so that the scientists, as he mentioned, are involved and so are good users and push their authorities to have the funding to pay for the network. Once we have got all that, we will get sustainability. We are fighting and working very hard to make that happen before the end of next year. And we have some contingency plans, so don't worry. Network is going to stay up.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Then we'll end on this positive note. I'm closing this session. It's the last session of today. I hope to see you all this evening at the opening reception of the conference. Enjoy.